This is Mark from IDG here in our Chicago office. And I'm happy today to have as our guest, Bryant Greening from LegalRideshare. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. You look a lot more professional than me. So
We do this a lot, so I've got the lighting all set up. I, try to make it look good.
great, great. Well, for those of you viewers who might have been familiar with IDG, we just opened our new office. Actually, it was more than just recently. It started at the end of January. So now we've been here for 4 months or more, and we're kind of settled in. We had our grand opening. We recently had a wellness fair, which was a huge success. And Bryant, you can attest to that. We had a lot of turnout and a lot of resources for drivers. One of the resources we have, which I'm sitting in right now, is the LegalRideshare satellite office at our facility. And Bryant, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how this partnership happened and where you hope this will lead to.
Yeah, absolutely. The turnout for the events has been really unbelievable, and it's been just such a blessing to have such support from the driver community. I remember when we first met that the driver community was very segregated. There was not any center place for drivers to go. There was no central voice. And what we've got here with IDG now is a collaborative effort to push drivers' rights and ensure the best possible environment. So I'm really proud to be a part of what you guys are doing, and I'm really proud to see how far the movement has gone. From our perspective, LegalRideshare has kind of grown with the community. We are a law firm that represents drivers after accidents and injuries. We help with insurance claims. And we started when Uber and Lyft were essentially new services in Chicago. I remember when we first opened our doors, they were actually pink mustaches that were attached to the front of drivers' vehicles, if that gives an idea as to how long it's been. Our firm has offices in the downtown area. We've got an office in Wrigleyville, and then now we've got this satellite office at the IDG headquarters, which we're really excited about because it allows us to be easily connected with the driver community. People can pop in and out and come see us, and it just makes it really easy for us to connect.
That's great. Yeah. And like I said, I'm sitting in your office right now, and I don't want to move the camera too much, but in the background, there are some videos that explain what LegalRideshare is about. There is a little kiosk. So if you're not here and a driver comes to our office, they can just enter their information. You'll be notified and follow up with that driver. And we also have, see if I can get this here on camera, one of these fancy webcams. And so that's the cool thing for me, because I'm a tech guy. You have partnerships with dash cam companies, more than one. That one, Display Ride, happens to be one of the higher end ones. But, I think that's a good segue into why this is all important. And you mentioned accidents and insurance and things. I wanted to spend some time, because we haven't actually seen each other for a while other than at our events. What's been going on in your world, especially now that we're coming out of the pandemic and rideshare has picked up? I mean, what are you seeing and hearing from your clients?
Yeah, coming out of the pandemic, there's been a boom in the industry, and drivers are back on the roads. Passengers are using the apps at a much higher rate than they were in the past years, and with that, we're seeing an increase in cases. It really just comes down to math. The more people that are on the road, the more time that they're on the road, the more likely it is that an accident or injury is going to happen. So our phone lines have been ringing, and we've been helping lots of drivers with their accident and injury claims. So many drivers don't truly appreciate the claims process until they're a part of it. We try to get out in front and give drivers support when they've got questions about insurance. What do I need? How do I best cover myself? What can I do proactively to ensure the best possible outcome if and when I'm involved in a crash? So we're looking at it from both angles. We're helping drivers before a crash, and we're helping drivers after a crash.
Yeah. And I know every case is different, but can you like describe what is it when a driver first contacts you? Like what are their concerns or what are their initial questions for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it ultimately depends on the type of claim that they're calling about. So when you're involved in an accident, there's essentially two claims for damages. It's a bodily injury claim or a property damage claim. We handle the bodily injury aspect first and foremost. We help drivers get the medical treatment that they need, recover the costs of that medical treatment. We collect lost wages for drivers from the insurance companies, pain and suffering, disability. So any damages that the driver sustains, we're stepping in to help advocate to collect those. A lot of times drivers call us and they're not certain how to even initiate the process. What's the right insurance company to be talking to? Is Uber going to pay to fix or replace my lost wages? Is the at-fault driver the place to go? How am I going to go collect this money as quickly as I possibly can? And as you mentioned, every case is different, but ultimately we're going to help you navigate that path to ensure, one, the most lucrative outcome, and two, the quickest result so that bills can get paid and you can get back on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Not to talk, too long, I tend to go on tangents here, but one of the chief questions that we get on bodily injury claims is, how am I going to pay for my medical treatment? I don't have insurance, for instance. How am I going to get into a doctor? Well, that's one of the reasons why you want to come to us early, because we can actually set you up with our network of doctors who will make sure that you get the treatment that you need, whether you have insurance or not. And then they'll get paid at the end of the case from the settlement that we're able to negotiate. So you get the treatment to get healed, get back on the road, and then we'll take care of resolving that bill for you. You're not going to have to worry about it.
That's a really great point that you raised. And we talked about this offline before. One of your core pieces of advice was always go to the hospital. And I want to unpack that a little bit because, let's say I'm a driver, I get into a fender bender, but, I feel fine. Should I go to the hospital? And how would I even do that?
Yeah, so we recommend that you get checked out. It's worth getting a physical examination, whether it be from the emergency room or going to an immediate care or your primary care doctor. Depending on the severity of the injury, you can make a decision as to which path you go. But the reason why you want to quickly get medical attention is in case your symptoms change. Insurance companies love to hang their hats on delays in treatment. They'll say, well, Mark, you were involved in an accident 3 weeks ago, and now you're just starting to go to the doctor. What happened in that period of time? If you were really injured in this accident, you would have gone much sooner. So we tell drivers the day of the accident, the day after the accident, get in to see someone so that you're stopping that gap in treatment. You get the medical record, there's documentation that you made complaints of injury, and then you're buying yourself time. If you want to wait a couple days to see if the symptoms get better or worsen, you can. We're not then worried about a big gap between the date of the accident and the first date of treatment.
Okay, so that clarifies. So it's not necessarily like call an ambulance. I want to go to the emergency room right now because I have a sprained, pinky or something. It's make sure you see a doctor within like 24 hours or something.
The sooner the better. And one thing that personal injury attorneys get a bad rap. We're telling people to do things that they shouldn't be doing. That's not what's happening here. We're not trying to encourage anyone to get treatment that they don't need. If you are involved in an accident, chances are your body was impacted in some way. There was some force put on your body. It's smart to have a physician check you out, make sure that there's not some latent issue that you're not observing. Maybe you hit your head and you're dizzy, or maybe the doctor's going to look you in the eyes and say, oh no, we need to get a CT scan, or whatever the situation is. You're protecting yourself from a health perspective by getting that initial treatment. Now, if that's all the treatment that you need, if the doctor checks you out and says you're good to go, you don't feel any symptoms in the days going forward, then you should stop. You shouldn't, rack up bills and get treatment that you don't need, but you should protect yourself after an event occurs.
Mhm. And I know, like, because we're going through this as a family, just trying to get an appointment with a doctor, it could be 3 weeks, a month from now. Is it okay to like go to one of those urgent care, CVS, those kinds of things?
Absolutely. All you're doing in that initial appointment is essentially documenting that the incident occurred and that you feel a little off. You describe the symptoms. If you feel something in your neck or your back or your shoulder or your arms, tell them specifically, but you're also just getting that piece of paper that says, I was involved in a crash. I'm concerned for my well-being. And it then allows you to take the next step if the symptoms progress, worsen, change for your next appointment, which may be a week or two out given a doctor's schedule.
Yeah. Related to that, so if I'm a driver and I get into an accident, and the police are called and there's various, emergency responders, whoever else is involved, the other party in the accidents are probably also, in your face asking for things. What should you say? Or, I mean, should you just be like, I'm not talking to anybody and, contact my attorney, or what? Do you have any general advice on that?
Yeah. So one thing you never want to do is admit fault. That's for the attorneys and the insurance companies to figure out. You can describe to the police officer your recollection of the event. You really want to choose your words carefully, because the way that you frame how an incident occurred can change liability entirely. A couple words here and a couple words there can make an accident that was not your fault either look like it's your fault or look like it was partially your fault. And we want to make sure that we're choosing our words in a way that places blame on the correct parties. If you're responsible, you don't need to apologize. You just tell the officer what happened and then move on. Be clear, concise, and remove yourself from the scene as soon as it's appropriate.
Yeah. I want to move on to, something which is on the mind of a lot of drivers these days. We still have not come out of this situation where carjackings are on the rise. I know it's on my mind. A lot of drivers, veteran drivers, have not come back because of the fear. In that situation where there is some kind of a crime that has taken place, we're talking about a crime of violence, a shooting, your car has been stolen. Are there any special advice you have? It's more than just a fender bender?
Yeah, so these are obviously really traumatic events, and they're happening more and more often to members of our community. At first and foremost, these are criminal events. You want to make sure that the police are involved if your vehicle gets stolen or you're carjacked or assaulted. Making that police report is step one, because you want to be able to find out who did this. That the offender is really who's responsible for the event. And there are times in which you can file lawsuits against those individuals. Generally, you're going to be looking to see, does that individual have any sort of assets that would be worth going after? I tell drivers all the time, you can sue people anytime you want, but sometimes it doesn't make financial sense. If you say a typical carjacking that we've been seeing, a young individual is a member of a gang and carjacks someone, the chances that that person has assets worth pursuing are slim to none. So are you really going to go spend thousands of dollars in court when the chances of recovery are slim? That wouldn't be my advice. What you can do in that situation is file the police report, make sure that the crime is documented, and then the state of Illinois actually has a victims compensation fund that provides benefits for people who are crime victims, who have medical expenses, who have property that's lost as a result of a criminal act. So typically when drivers call our office, that's the path that I recommend. That's going to be the path of least resistance. the most financially viable for the driver and hopefully recover some of those losses that you sustained. There are situations in which we have filed lawsuits for drivers against rideshare companies or security services, or you name the entity, but those are extraordinary circumstances where we have found that there could be potential liability from the company beyond just setting up the ride. That the company did something else to help facilitate the criminal act or make the driver more vulnerable in that particular situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know, because you mentioned that before about the Illinois Attorney General's Victim Compensation Fund, and we definitely try and steer drivers there. I think I have not seen a case yet where the driver was awarded it because I think it's not sure how much funds are still left, and it's a long process to go through that. But what if the driver is injured to the point where they have to go to the hospital because of this crime? Where can they get compensation for their medical expenses?
So unfortunately, with the current setup of the independent contractor relationship, there's not a clear path to recovery in that scenario. If you were working for, say, a cab company and something like this happened, there would be a much clearer path through workers' compensation to get benefits such as cost of medical treatment. There's occupational hazard policies that other professional drivers have that pay for such treatment. But Uber, Lyft, other gig companies, they're just not as readily available in terms of insurance policies, and most of them provide no support. So that's where we then start looking. Can you sue the passenger? Can you sue the attacker? But the chance that the gig company pays for it is unfortunately quite the uphill battle.
Yeah, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But I wanted to ask, in this whole process, there's a lot of talk about getting data from Uber and Lyft about who the passenger was, what information they knew prior to the crime happening. In your experience, is that as straightforward as, because according to the app companies, they're going to say, oh yeah, we cooperate with the police, we'll hand over the information. What we've heard in the reality is that you have to file a subpoena against them for them to turn over the data. Is that what's going on?
It's very common that Uber and Lyft and all the others protect their data with a clenched fist. They do not like to give up information as it relates to passengers, location, anything along those lines. So where we've had success is filing discovery petitions against the companies when drivers are involved in these events. And the company then is required to give up certain information. So for instance, passenger name, address, phone number, things of that nature. And the police are using similar tactics in filing criminal subpoenas and requiring that data to be shared in that regard.
And how fast is that turned around? Because you can imagine, like, if my car was just stolen, I want to know right away so that it can be tracked or something. I mean, does that discovery take a few days, a week, or how long?
Well, that's the difference between the criminal side and the civil side. From our perspective, we file something with the court and we get a court date in a month, and then we have an initial appearance, and it could be a long time before we get that information. The police, generally the turnaround time is faster because there's more teeth from the criminal branches.
Okay. With regards, I wanted to get back to the issue of this violent crime. It's been very sad because there are a number of drivers. We have met the families. We have helped promote the GoFundMe's for hospital and funeral expenses, and you can see that on our Facebook pages and sites. And I'm not going to name any particular driver, but you can Google them if you want. One of the things that we've seen that I think the companies do, because it's such a high profile incident and there's a lot of PR backlash, is that the app companies will approach the families and offer some sort of monetary compensation for a settlement or a confidentiality thing. Is that what you're seeing from your side? And if any advice you have about if something like that were to be offered?
Yeah, you need to be careful what you sign. We have heard several instances in which families have been approached with very small settlement offers from the companies. And generally what they're doing is they're buying silence. It depends on the circumstances for each family. If the family needs a certain amount of money to pay a medical bill, and for all intents and purposes, that closes the case in their minds, as long as the medical bill's paid, they're satisfied, then they should consider resolving the case for that amount of money, and understanding that they need to be careful about the terms of confidentiality and non-disparagement, various other provisions that are in those releases. But if the family is not satisfied with the amount of money that's being offered, signing that release would be a big mistake. It would close the case, it would muzzle the family and the victim, and there's really no way out of it. Once you release the claim, it's done. There's no lawsuit to be filed. There's no more money to get. So you want to ensure that you're, one, okay with the amount, and two, that all your damages are known. So if you're going to need a future surgery, you don't want to settle that case for pennies, because that surgery needs to be paid for too.
Yeah, and I've personally spoken with a driver who was a victim of crime. His vehicle was carjacked. He had some personal items stolen. The story that I got from him was that one of the app companies approached him with a settlement. For whatever reason, he turned it down. I think probably because he felt it wasn't enough. And then I think they rescinded the offer. And so now he's out of luck because, he doesn't have the monies that he needs, and he doesn't have this offer on the table. So to your point, I think you have to be careful, but if you do turn it down, you might not get a second or a bigger offer.
Yeah, a lot of times, particularly without an attorney, there's not much negotiation that takes place. The company presents the family with an offer, and it's a take it or leave it. And if it's rejected, then you better have a backup plan. That said, you can't take pennies just to take pennies. If, say, this individual that you're talking about, say that he had his iPhone stolen and his wallet stolen, and he had evidence that he'd lost $5,000 worth of equipment and cash and whatever, and they come in and they offer $500, well, there's not much of a decision to make there. You're really the $500 doesn't change anything. But if they offered $5,000, well, maybe that person would consider that to be made whole, and they could live with the terms of the release, and that would be a satisfactory result for that individual.
Yeah. I mean, it was more complicated than that. And what we're seeing with a lot of drivers is when they're a victim of crime, they're often underwater they have a car loan, or they have something, a bill to pay. And even if they get compensation, now they still don't have a car, or they're not able to work and generate income. So that's why I think they feel hesitant about accepting a deal, or they want more money.
Yeah. One thing that's important to understand about these sorts of negotiations is that the law is challenging in this area. Uber and Lyft and all the others, they lack control over a criminal who attacks a driver. So if a third party comes up to the car and carjacks the driver, it's difficult legally to hold the gig company responsible for that. And it's also difficult even if it's a passenger in the vehicle, because as soon as the passenger commits a criminal act, legally speaking, it becomes difficult to prove foreseeability, which is just the idea that the company could predict that this person would commit that crime during this ride. And if you can't prove that, you're not going to hold them responsible in court.
Yeah. It's a big issue for us, as IDG, because as you know, we're advocating for passenger verification. And we feel like a lot of these cases happen when you accept a ride and the passenger doesn't use their real name. there's no photo, or they use Mickey Mouse or something, that means like that passenger, could be fine. Maybe it's a kid or a friend of somebody, but you just never know. So anyway, there's a lot to unpack, and it's definitely precarious work. That's kind of the term we're finding a lot of public health researchers are using, that gig work, more than just Uber and Lyft drivers. Anytime you have an app and you don't have a lot of protections, as an employee might have, you're always, just one ride or one job away from potential catastrophe.
There's workers in this space are vulnerable. There's no question about it. A lot of people choose this type of work because they like the independence of it, but with the independence comes a certain amount of vulnerability. If the job's taken away for some reason, you lose your source of income and bills don't get paid. If you're attacked, there's not a workers' compensation policy for you to go after and try to collect from. If you have a complaint about the company, even if legitimate, there's not an HR department to go through. So with that independence, things become a lot murkier, and drivers unfortunately just don't have the ample resources to protect themselves with the current setup of the gig economy. So we're looking for ways, and I know IDG is as well, to try to protect drivers, be it through legislation, be it through changes in policies with the apps, or anything else that people want to propose. There needs to be better protection. There needs to be more for drivers to feel safe in and out of the car, on and off the clock. The environment's just got to be better.
Yeah. Well, Bryant, I want to thank you. I know we just had a short amount of time today, but we covered a lot of ground. And I just want to close by saying, as the weather warms up and people are out and about, I noticed the scooters are coming back to Chicago. And how do you feel about the scooters?
Well, it's a loaded question here. As a concept, I think they're a great way to get from point A to point B, and they help close that last mile for a lot of people. But what we've seen in Chicago is that there's a lot of negligence and a lot of injuries, people on the sidewalks, people getting hit by cars. You can imagine the circumstances. So we're hoping that drivers are mindful that there's these scooters on the road, because we're not used to looking for them. So pay attention. And we're hopeful that the scooter riders are mindful that there are pedestrians and others using the roadway, and that they act safely as well.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed that things go a little bit better this time than in the years past.
Well, great. Well, next time we talk, I'll ask you if you have any scooter cases that are of interest. So
yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Great.
It was great catching up.
Thank you.